Seek and ye shall find, looking for joy in life. I liked that first saying, seek and ye shall find. I like to consider myself a seeker, and I think we're all seekers, and I think it's important to always be seeking. So when I was trying to think about what I wanted to talk about, I knew I wanted to talk about joy, but I had that sentence come in my head, seek and ye shall find, because I think it's so easy to see all the negative stuff around us. The joy isn't always right in our faces, right? So we got to kind of look for it. We got to seek it. So I felt like it was a good kind of intro into the talk for today. So when I always like to look up definitions of what I'm going to talk about, and so I looked up the definition of joy. I don't know if you've ever done that. It might seem like a silly thing to do, but the definition was really profound to me. It states, joy is defined as a deep, lasting state of well-being and gratitude and contentment that transcends circumstances and arises from within. And I thought, how beautiful is that? You know, let's break that down. A deep, lasting state. This is a state of being that is meant to be with us for a very long time, our whole lives, right? A state of well-being. What is well-being? It's not just a physical state of being, it's a mental state of being. We all know our mental state affects our physical state, so it's a state of well-being and gratitude. We all know that being in a state of gratitude is key for life, right? That's how we live our best life, is staying in that state of gratitude. And a contentment that transcends circumstances. And as humans, we have a lot of circumstances, right? She just transcended her circumstances from yesterday, and she came in here today to inspire us all. You know, that's transcending your circumstances. And at the end of the day, our joy arises from within. We always talk about this being an inside job. So this joy arises from within. I love the feeling of joy. I sat down and started thinking about, what is that feeling of joy? What gives you that feeling of joy? You know, and I love staring at the sky. I'm a sky girl. So day and night I'm staring at the sky. When I'm driving, I have to, you know, I do have ADHD, just so you guys know. So the sky is a big distraction for me. But oh my gosh, the feeling I get when I see an amazing sunset, you know, when the colors in the sky are just there and the clouds. I mean, right now I'm getting chills just thinking about it. You know, that's joy. When I see that amazing, on the moon the other night, I don't know if you guys got to see it, but there was one night where I was driving home and it was so huge and it was so orange, and you know, again, I probably should have pulled over because I'm just like, not even watching the road, because I'm just like, oh my God, the moon. But that feeling, that was joy, you know. What about when, I love the baby videos, and you know, many of us have experienced this in person, but when that baby gets that giggle, that laugh, and they just keep doing it over and over again. You do something so simple and they just laugh hysterically. You know, and then you have to laugh with them. That's joy. You know, that's that, you know. And then music and art. Music, first of all, I talk about a lot. Music is my, you know, everything. I've been raised with music my whole life, and it's amazing the joy I get from music. All kinds of music. How it gives you those feelings. And then art, I've always loved art. I was an arts and crafts girl when I was in school, and thankfully I've gotten back into art later in life, and when you look at an amazing piece of art, the way it speaks to you, the way it makes you feel, that's joy. That's joy. So, you know, joy is always within us, right? It's always there. I love that movie Inside Out, where it shows all the little people, you know, and of course Joy is my favorite character. And I think it's a great reminder that yes, all those feelings are in us. Sadness is there, anxiety is there, all those feelings are there. But joy is always there too. So we can't forget that she's there. She's just waiting for us to tap in, you know, tune into that. You know, I talk about, I love Abraham Hicks, and one of her sayings is tune in, tap in. Because the state of joy is what she talks about, is that's the energy we want to always try to be in, because then we're going to draw more joy to us, right? So that tap in, tune in, that's because joy is always waiting for you, just right there. But our outside world, you know, it really tries to dictate our emotions, right? There's so much stuff around here to make us feel the opposite of joy. But we have to see past it. And we have to remember that we are the creators of our reality. So, I mean, I remind myself that all the time. I am the creator of my reality. What does that mean? I get to choose how I feel every day. You know, and of course things are going to affect me in the outside world. And I'm not saying we have to ignore those feelings. We need to acknowledge those feelings. We need to see why we kind of need to investigate. I talk about being our own little detective and investigate why we're feeling this way. But at the end of the day, we can't live there, we can't dwell there. We have to still be trying to seek that joy to pull us out of that way of feeling. Some people it's easier than others, right? I consider myself a born optimist. You know, from the day I came out the womb, I was in a good mood. You know, and I know not everybody knows, but I was born with a cleft lip and palate. So I came out of the womb having had surgeries right out the gate. Lots of doctor's appointments, lots of surgeries as a child. But I had some of the most amazing doctors and nurses that had the best attitudes, and I had that energy around me at a young age. You know, they made everything fun for me whenever I'd go to these different things, and I carried their joy with me, you know. And so even though I was dealing with things that maybe not all my friends around me were dealing with, I still was always a happy kid. I was always in a great mood, you know, and I found joy in the simplest things. And I carried that with me for quite a big part of my life. You know, I became a mom at a young age. The joy of being a mother, that was an amazing thing. You know, something I always knew I wanted to do. But later in my life, I faced one of my hardest moments. The man that I loved and spent 25 years with, I unfortunately lost him initially to addiction. And a few years later, he lost his life. And that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever been through. And it sucked all the joy out of me. There was no joy left in me. And I pretty much was a broken person. And I didn't really know what to do with myself for a while, because I had never felt that way before. I was like, how do I do this? You know, and I just kind of was in a cloud for a little bit. But, you know, I have some really amazing family, and I have some amazing friends, and they knew I was hurting, and they tried to be there for me. But ultimately, it took me having to recognize that I had to do something for myself. So I did little things. I started reading inspirational books. I started listening, seeking out inspirational music. I also started trying some new hobbies. I always wanted to play around with plants and gardening, so I started doing that. I started having houseplants. I started doing gardening with a girlfriend, and I hadn't done art since I was in high school, and so I started buying a couple of paint supplies, and I started doing a little painting at home, little arts and crafts, going to some events, and you know, and I'm not going to tell you that overnight I was fixed, but I was seeking things on a regular basis to bring joy back into my life. And it ultimately is what brought me here to MSC. You know, if I had never started that seeking of that, I would have never discovered the metaphysical world and really started to connect with it. Because, you know, as a child, I was raised very standard religious, and I kind of shunned all that, and I didn't even want to believe in God at all, you know. And so when I was on that journey to try and find my joy again, I found my spiritual side that I was missing. I finally found what made sense to me. And I would have never thought I'd be up here talking to you guys, but coming here, that developed, that came out of me. I started getting these messages of things I needed to share with other people. And so, you know, this joy, it was there, but I had to seek it. I had to work at it. I couldn't just let it pop up on its own. It wasn't going to do that. I was in a really dark place. So I had to seek my way out. I had to find that light to pull me out of that place. And, you know, I just want you to realize that no matter where or what you're dealing with, you can seek your way out of it too. Because joy in your life gives you purpose. It gives you peace. It gives you understanding. And it aligns everything when it becomes your focus. It's really the state of being we should strive to be in on a regular basis, because it's what's going to align everything and bring everything that we want for ourselves in our life. I wanted to show you guys one of the other things that I did when I was going through that time period is I wanted to have little reminders. Because even though, like I said, I wasn't feeling it right away, I knew I needed help, but I needed to help myself. So I was in Dollar Tree one day and I saw these little chalkboard things. And I think there was a couple in a pack. And I bought them and I wrote, and these are the ones from this time period. I still have them, they still hang in my room. Forgiven, healing, and love. And I just kind of had those words around because I needed to hear them, you know. And I even hung signs up with affirmations on them. And so, you know, you gotta find what works for you, but don't be afraid to do things like write little notes to yourself. Like, little things like that make a difference. You know, I looked at those words when I wake up in the morning and I remind myself that I was forgiven for anything that I thought that I had done wrong, and that I was healing and healing the process, and that love is always there for me. So don't be afraid to do those little things for yourself. Even if it makes you feel silly, do it anyways. It will help. Because we need to always be seeking joy in our life. Joy is what we're meant to be, and it's always there for you. And so that is my message today.